So the second stage is crossing the threshold, tests and allies and enemies, approaching the inmost cave. Yeah. Okay. So we're at backwards 3 o'clock.
That's right.
9
o'clock?
I'll let me open it up, the conversation on this with another number from Swedenborg. This is Secrets of Heaven 3175. As long as it confines itself to the memory, truth is merely knowledge. If it is to permeate us, it has to be called up from there and born deep within. After all, our humanity lies deep within, in our rational mind. Unless we are rational, we're not human. We cannot possibly be rational unless we have goodness. Interesting to link goodness and what you think, what's goodness have to do with? But the goodness that sets us apart from animals is to love God and love our neighbor. This is the source of all human goodness. Such goodness is what truth needs to be introduced into and unite with within our rational mind. Truth is introduced and united to goodness. How do you do it? When we love God and love our neighbor. Because truth then takes up residence in goodness. And truth looks to goodness as its ultimate aim and its soul, and so as the source of its life. So it's a changing of, I may have heard concepts to, these are marching orders that lead me toward actually amending or making me act like a better human.
Well, and doesn't this mirror the way we think about education for children? If we really think that the test that we give them on spelling is the important thing, then we're missing what the point of education is.
Right.
We want people to be able to spell so that when they're trying to communicate through writing, other people will understand what they mean, because spelling can matter. Grammar can matter. So we think about those things not from the standpoint of you have to get it right or else, because that's kind of missing the point. The point is, can you communicate effectively the words that you want to in writing? And I love thinking about I think that Swedenborg and also Maria Montessori speaks a lot about how early in childhood, it's actually like our soul is reaching out through the body as a tool into the universe to grab what it is, and see and sense and feel and touch and taste everything that is around it, to understand our relationship from our soul to its environment. And then we do need direction on what's actually good, because if we're just grabbing and going, I like this, we're going to keep grabbing our ice cream and eating our ice cream and eating our ice cream and just not actually enjoying life. We have to start enacting the things that we learn and putting them into useful context. And it's not just for self. How do we do it? Well, we love the Lord and we love our neighbor. That's the transition, is when we go, oh, these things I find in my environment are things that I can use to make you happy and make you happy.
Yeah.
Well,
and that in effect will make much more of a difference.
And those things are all well and good within the classroom. That's why Egypt corresponds to education, right? That's the beginning that is being escaped. That's the known world for the children of Israel, right? When being led by Moses. You can get into a echo chamber with that. Oh, I know these things, but you're not testing your mettle in any way. So the crossing of the threshold, again, with this stuff, these stages are named based off of mythological motifs, and in some cases, biblical motifs. So it's not dogma, it's literally descriptive in some ways. So that threshold, we're not in Kansas anymore. We've fallen down the rabbit hole.
Yep.
We're through the looking glass. This is the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea.
I think, and the Lord of the Rings, I'm thinking of the movie where Sam says, if we
this
take one more step, this is the first time we'll be farther from home than I've ever been. Remember that part? And they're in like some little field.
And they cross that threshold, and then I don't want to get too much into it, but there's even a motif that happens a lot, the cantina from Star Wars, with the music, where you first start to see people that don't look like you. There's a halfway house is another way of referring to it. So there they go to the prancing pony in The Lord of the Rings, right? Where there are hobbits, but there are also big people, right? So this is where we leave school, we graduate, we cross the Red Sea, Jesus is baptized by John. Again, there's a river. And after that point, that's when the ministry begins. That's when the adventure really begins.
After he gets baptized by John, I hope I have this right, but I think right after that in one of the Gospels, it says, from that day forward, Jesus went out preaching, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Something about, I'm getting goosebumps right now just saying that. Something about that is like, we flipped a switch. Like something's going on here. Man, it's just, it's powerful.
And my whole dissertation was about an archetypal figure, character. John the Baptist was one that I call the foreshadow, but John the Baptist is an example of this. And as revelation, as the mentor, whatever you want to call his role there, it's not just, from that moment on for Jesus. John the Baptist's role has been performed. He runs off to get decapitated, basically, right? Like he is an egoless figure. He has served his purpose in ferrying Jesus across the Jordan, per se, into his ministry. So that's the role of the mentor. And yes, sometimes Gandalf returns in some other form, but it's usually in that inner, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi as a spectral form.
It's such an important thing what John says, John the Baptist says when some of his disciples come, because Jesus' disciples are now baptizing. And they're getting upset. And he's like, this is exactly what's supposed to happen. I'm not the one. I've said that since the beginning. It's him. I must decrease. He must increase. And it's the same thing about our transition from gaining the tools and the knowledge and the goods and truths that we need to live, and then to actually live those things. I think about my own process and education to become a pastor, and it's an intense schooling for several years to do that, and there's a joy in it because I love studying these books. I love just reading through the theology and just going, these pieces fit together so beautifully, and I can paint pictures about it. But that doesn't do anything for the relationships that I have with other people unless I start embodying those ideas. And what to me helps me want to embody it is when I see other people doing it. And so, for instance, I bring this story up kind of as an example of this. I know this lady in England who came to conserve a first edition of Heaven and Hell that I found in a closet that was preserved from mold over top and mold down below.
Wow.
And it was just this first edition of Heaven and Hell sitting there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need to find somebody to conserve this. So I called this archivist, and they said, this person's the person. She's the best. So these two little Italian ladies, Danila is the name that I remember, are sitting there bouncing around and talking in Italian. And they're talking about the paper, not about the theology.
Right.
But their excitement about the quality of the paper and how to take care of it and all of the details they knew about that paper. They obviously knew about paper, but they were doing something with it. And for me to see their love being enacted before me, even in a different language, makes me want to go, okay, what's in me that's just knowledge that maybe I wouldn't think would be exciting, but I can put it out there and somebody else might see it.
We do a group, like we call it, community chat. So people who have become members of the Swedenborg Foundation, which you all can, by the way, we meet like once a month and just do video chat. And usually I'll just ask how things are going in people's spiritual lives and what they're doing. And whenever I hear about people using the concepts in Swedenborg to kind of guide how their life goes, I got to up my game. I forgot. You really can use this stuff because I'm so used to talking about it. So I feel some of that same, it like jolts me awake. But also with this, you've got these stages of the mentor has to then go away. You've got to take this truth and bring it to life. So much of Swedenborg's Secrets of Heaven is talking about Jesus going through that process. He'll go on at length about this story about grief in the Old Testament is about Jesus's grief and having like a version of what you just said, where he thinks he's just gathering these ideas for the pleasure he finds in them, but actually they've got to sort of die in a way because he's got to use them instead. And it all would seem very abstract and strange, but you can start to tease apart, oh, this happens in my life. This has happened at different times for me. I'm living my own little version of the great story.
One of the most fascinating lines in the whole of the Gospels to me is the short line about Jesus growing in wisdom. It's right as he's a boy,
right.
basically. It just references, and he grew in strength and wisdom, or something along those lines. And it's just a very short snippet of what's happening to the Lord. It's kind of weird to think of God in a human form, but there's development there.
Yeah.
He's showing us that same development that's in all humanity by actually taking on the human form and going through every bit of the process with us.
Yeah. Let me read something about this phase, and then I want to talk about the inmost cave, approaching it. But this is from Secrets of Heaven again. He said, "It is hard to detach truth from the earthly self and raise it from that level to the rational plane. Our earthly self contains misconceptions, cravings for evil, and a convinced belief in falsity. So long as these are present and attach themselves to truth, so long our earthly self holds truth back, not allowing it to rise up to that level, from that level to the rational plane. However, as soon as the Lord detaches our evil cravings and false convictions, and therefore our misconceptions, and goodness causes us to start loathing arguments against truth and laughing at doubts about it, truth has reached the stage for leaving the earthly self. Then it is time for truth to rise up into our rational mind and clothe itself in a state of goodness." So it's like, why do you need to go on the journey in the first place? Can't you just stay where you started? The problem is there's all this stuff in our first state that would smother and destroy the goodness and truth that God's trying to introduce in there.
Yeah.
So you have to step out in order to free yourself from that so that you can rise here.
Yeah. I mean, and those things have a difference. Those truths that you're gaining there. Again, the arming or the dressing of the hero, mithril coat for Frodo, a wand for Harry. The garments for this journey that you need, I believe, are of a different quality than that nourishment that happened in the Garden of Eden, right? Those are important. They get you ready. But now we're talking about handheld tools that you are starting to, for yourself, use, right? I don't know whether there's a God, but I do know that I love my family, right?
Yes.
The very particular things that you say, I'm questioning this, I'm questioning everything still, but at least I can reach out and grab onto this truth. I think that's of a different quality, and it's sorry to keep using these examples, but it's Harry meeting Hermione and Ron. It's Frodo finding his Sam and Pippin and right.
Yep.
It's starting to get a group of people around you, because in a very literal way, as we head into second adulthood, the people you choose to be around start to have a real effect on you, and you have to start seeing that as part of your own journey. Yeah.
We mentioned kind of at the beginning the difference between animal and human, kind of having to do with instinctual knowledge versus kind of blank slate type of thing. But Swedenborg doesn't talk about us being a blank slate in that, not being instinct, but that we are born with hereditary inclinations of every kind, good and evil. But he focuses a lot more on the hereditary evil part.
Come on, man.
I know.
Give us a break.
In the process of regeneration, that repentance part of coming to recognize those things that maybe aren't so useful, and then being able to come to see the rational things as true, it's such a hard part of our journey, because it's like, why would I want to change? I think that's one of the struggles that we have, is until we come to a point where we accept that what I already know or what I already believe or what I already am trying to do isn't working, that it's not necessarily fixing everything, or the problems persist, or I'm causing more problems. Until we get to that point of breaking, we're not going to look for a new answer. And so, in a weird way, the Lord allows those hereditary inclinations to fester in us in our natural humanity, so that when we come to a state of wanting something more that is good, we can then reevaluate. So you're talking about the system that, well, I don't know this thing, but I do know I love my family.
Right.
With theology, I think it's a very similar thing. I don't know a whole lot about necessarily what the Bible is going to tell me in the end, but I've built a trust in the Lord that he's going to tell me the truth. So I might not understand all of these things or the weird correspondences, but I'm going to trust that this is true because I believe it comes from God. And then we can structure our lives around it, even though we don't necessarily fully rationally believe all of those things. And I think that in the Bible, this comes across in the very ritualistic nature of the Israelites, and how they were told to build the temple this way and to do these things that way. And when they did, everything would be prosperous. It's a part of our gaining of confidence. Yeah. It's the knowledge that when we do follow this path, it's going to result in the right things. When we don't, it won't. And that's how we come out of that state of not knowing any truth to being willing to see truth, to then wanting to know the truth so that it'll help us live well.
And there's a reason for all this, which is that we are approaching the inmost cave.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So what's the cave?
Okay, so the inmost cave, Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So I'll leave it to you two to talk about regeneration, probably. But in this case, there's a boon, there's a treasure, there's an internal salve that you need. We've said it before, no one gets through this life unscathed. It isn't just these little trip ups and challenges with little schoolyard bullies. We are heading toward crisis in our lives, right? That's the crisis of our parents dying. That's the crisis of, the existential crisis of not knowing, having a progressing upward. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting smarter. And then suddenly at a certain point, your physical vessel starts to go the opposite direction.
Tell me about it.
How do we deal with that, right? So the inmost cave, the belly of the whale moment, the long night of the soul, or the dark night of the soul. These are all metaphors in every culture with different names for this existential crisis or crises, right, that we're all heading toward. And this is what we're being prepared for, because we need to have our confidence built up a bit against these smaller little challenges in this unknown world we've entered. Yeah. I'd love you to talk about that from a Swedenborgian standpoint. What is this stage?
Let's go. Well, two things pop to mind. One is temptation, or what are sometimes translated spiritual crises. That these are these dark nights of the soul that you have to go through in order to progress. And within that, like the sort of, I feel like the cave you're entering is when you start to look at your own will. Mm-hmm. So you have the intellect, which is your ideas, but then you have your will. I want to read this, and then Alan, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But this is about this is the hard part of this journey within. This is from his book, True Christianity. It says, the reason why true repentance is to examine not only the actions of our life, but also the intentions of our will, is that our intellect and our will produce actions. We explore the intentions of our will by exploring our thoughts. Our intentions reveal themselves in our thoughts. For example, when we contemplate, will, and intend acts of revenge, adultery, theft, or false witness, or entertain desires for those things. So the easy part might be like, all right, I'm not doing any of this stuff. You look at my life, if on a closed circuit TV camera, look, I'm not doing anything. But the hard part is like, would I, if I could get away with it? And what kind of stuff am I harboring in myself? Like that's, to me, that feels like, oh, that's a cave. Like, what am I going to discover if I go in there?
And it's also a hard question to answer. We can think about something all day long and go, would I do this, that, or the other thing? And until we are actually in the moment, we don't know. I used to work in London, and the area we were in wasn't it had some crime issues. So there were times where I'd be a little nervous walking back to the train station, but I'm a bigger person and could also have a hero complex at times. Yeah. So there are parts of me that fantasize about what if somebody over there is being hurt by somebody else. Yeah. Would I actually step in and help? Yes. How could I step in and help? And, I can fantasize about that all day long. Unless it happens, I don't know if I would just turn and run the other direction or if I'd actually step in. And so it's a fascinating thing. We can think about these things a lot, but until the opportunities present themselves, we really don't know. And this is one of the things about Swedenborgian philosophy or theology that I think is awesome. He talks a lot about, if the opportunity presents itself, would you act in this way or that way? And in some ways, it means that if it were, the opportunity to do something good were to present itself and you would actually do it, in a way, it's already a part of you and you've done it. Yeah. Spiritually. And that's the same thing with evil. If there's a part of it that's attached to us where if the opportunity presents itself and there was no fear, no jail, my wife's not going to find about this thing or whatever it is that allows us to act in a way that we know is wrong. Yeah. Then we've already done it in our spirit. So the Lord says, he who looks upon another woman with a intent has already committed adultery in his heart. And that sounds so harsh because it's hard.
Well, it's like, because your mind is just like a runaway.
Our mind looks at things and goes, that's beautiful or that's attractive. And then it takes it and does what it does. And well, it's because we're not just influenced by God. Right. We're influenced by good and evil spirits as kind of this intermediate space where we get to tune in to the people or the spirits that we want to hear. Yeah. And so
heaven and hell.
It's amazing when that changeover happens, where it's not just those are my thoughts, thinking, why shouldn't I just run that guy off the road that cut me off? I'm not actually going to do that, even if the opportunity presented itself, because it has,
Yeah, that's right.
But I have those thoughts. Where are they coming from? Well, hell, really. Yep. And so now at this point, I can know that's not my thoughts. Stupid. Go back to hell.
It's an interesting. There's an interesting, I guess, duality to it. Where Swedenborg will talk about. There's one tool that he gives you is if you have running thoughts. I was just this morning before this show. I went to a place to pick up some breakfast, and I just was when I was getting into my car. I was like, man, I'm in touch with every hell that there is. Like just the thoughts I was having about everybody at that place. And it's not even like I'm not even intending these, but just like, oh, that person's stupid because they're doing this. I would do this way better than that person. Just like going, and I feel like, man, okay. I don't need to get too entangled in that. That just comes out of hell. So you don't want to do too much of that. But then on the other hand, you want to look in your will, and you tend to gloss over what's really there. So I'll give you a silly example, but people will, on YouTube, they'll write comments to us and to me that are insulting. No. And I'm serious. You'd think like, well, how can you insult perfection? But so I would, and especially earlier on, like I would be more fazed by those when they come along. And I was like, I would never do that. People who are like that, like what's wrong with these psychopaths that would like watch somebody and just want to reach out? But a few times when I've come across a YouTube video that I really don't like, when I believe the information you're putting out is a threat to the world, I could feel this urge and like, I know what I would say to that guy to try to derail him. And I'm like, dude, so that might be a case where like you sit with that and you really look in, is the root, which is that I hold others in contempt in comparison with myself, or you can maybe do a little inmost caving there. Like what's really in there?